some questions come up, and I'd like to ask about some of the tools that you have available or could have available. So I look at city like San Pablo or a city like Piedmont actually have license plate readers. If somebody enters just the town or city limits in a stolen vehicle, or in some cases, a vehicle that has no license plates at all, dispatch is immediately alerted. Now, I know some people, the ACLU, and some are opposed to that, but I do know both San Pablo and Piedmont, among others, the police are immediately alerted. Here comes a stolen vehicle into our town. And that's a wonderful enforcement tool. Now, I know we have talked about, you mentioned more cameras downtown, but is there any prospect of getting those kind of camera readers at generally at our borders?
We do have those cameras and that technology. We do have that where we get immediate alerts on it's called a hit, or an alert that would come through via email, not just to dispatchers, but it can also go to units out in the field. It'll show exactly what camera tripped it, what time it was. It's not real time, but it's pretty darn close. There's not a lot of latency there. But by the time you get that and comprehend it, now think about the next time you're driving, down California or even Broadway, just look at your watch and look at how far you could actually travel in 60 seconds. So the officer would have to try to anticipate, okay, did they make a right turn here? Did they make a left turn here? With a broad or a dispersed deployment of field officers, it makes it a little bit easier to try to intercept those cars. But we want to add more of that camera technology, because if you get multiple trips on two cameras, that'll immediately tell you which direction this car is going, and maybe give you an idea of where they might be headed. We're trying to look at some newer technology that has better algorithms for detecting other things besides just license plates, but vehicle specific things like a bumper sticker or a sticker in the window or front end damage. So we can put all of those parameters in, and will help us identify and locate that vehicle very quickly, especially on follow-up when we're investigating crimes and we really have that really good video evidence. That is very, very valuable to us, because that's going to help us not only find and catch these bad guys, but to convict them, because it's very difficult to argue with that video evidence. So another thing that these criminals will do is if they do a carjacking or they steal a car, they'll do something called cold plating. So they'll go look for sometimes any car, but a really smart criminal, if they let's say they carjacked or they stole a Chevy pickup, they're going to go look for another Chevy pickup parked in a parking lot, and they're going to take those license plates and put them on the car they just stole, or swap them. Because how often do you really pay attention to your license plates? Do you know if I were to go around the room and ask everybody, do you know your license plate number? And do you look for anything suspicious like that? So if that person doesn't notice that their license plates have been switched, they're actually driving around with stolen plates that are associated with a stolen vehicle. And the real bad guys with the stolen vehicle are driving around with what we would call cold plates that are not going to trip our license plate system, because they're not wanted, until the owner of that car who had his plate stolen realizes it and then reports it to the police, and then we enter those plates as lost or stolen. So they're very clever, or they think they are.
Can you tell us, we know during the pandemic, there was a decision made to not engage in enforcement stops in the city of Walnut Creek, and I don't want to blame it on Walnut Creek, on many, many cities.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that has certainly changed. So just the standard car stops, we often say that standard car stop results in the parolee with the bag of dope and a gun under his seat. And generally that's found simply by stopping a vehicle with expired registration or no front license plate. I think people think you can drive without a front license plate. Actually, you can't. So are traffic stops up, and what's happening with our department with respect to that?
They are now, because I gave very clear instructions when I first got here. So I'll kind of back up and talk about, because every police department kind of went through this. And it was not just COVID. COVID was one thing, because all of us scaled back the amount of contacts that we did just in the interest of public safety, to mitigate exposing people. Because, you know, oftentimes people are running around with COVID, they didn't even know they had it until they got tested, especially early on. So we really tried to limit the number of contacts that we had and really limit it to just critical police services. So, and it was different at every department, but here a directive came out that, you know, you're not going to do routine stops anymore, and just in the interest of everyone's safety. But really at the same time, in the heart of that, George Floyd happened. And, you know, I call it the George Floyd effect, where now cops were afraid to do anything because they're afraid of, you know, the cell phone cameras and the wrong impression, or, you know, sometimes you stop people and they're volatile just to bait you into a situation, and they have the camera ready and they're trying to, you know, get you to do something stupid or lose your cool, or to skew the situation to make a viral video on social media, because that's what it's all about right now. So everybody kind of, I call it, you know, everybody was hiding in their turtle shells. And when I first got here, it was no different. And, you know, for the first month or two, we really tried to, at least I did, try to learn what the culture was and how we got to this place outside of COVID and outside of the George Floyd effect. When I looked at the data, you know, our productivity was dropping off several years ago for a multitude of reasons. Part of it was staffing, part of it was just expectations. There was a myriad of things that can contribute that. Okay, so I'm here now. This is what my vision is for policing. I know it works, and I have a new management team. So we work together to not only look at the data, but really try to understand our culture, where our police officers were, what was the morale like, you know. And the reality is, what I found is a lot of officers really wanted to go out and work, but they felt that the previous direction still stood. And they also felt that they were getting peer pressure from some of the officers who were uncomfortable with making stops, because they were unsure if administration, like me, you know, is the new chief going to have my back? If I have to use force against someone, is the new chief going to support me? As long as I'm as legal, moral, ethical within policy, am I going to be supported? And a lot of people had that concern. So culture is a tough thing to change. It takes a long time, but I'm proud to say that we have changed it. Our ship is turning in a new direction. Yes, we gave new direction, but I didn't specifically say you will make this many car stops in a shift. My philosophy is people work better when you inspire them to get the mission done. So we focused on what the mission was, what's really important right now, which is high visibility policing. We explained why it works. The data's there. Now, it doesn't necessarily work with violent crime, like I mentioned, but and as you had mentioned, Matt, you know, a car stop for no front license plate, which the law requires you to have 2 plates if they were issued. Motorcycles are issued 1 plate. You're only required to have 1 plate on the motorcycle. But if we pull a car over for no front license plate, and the person's on parole or subject to search, and they have dope and a gun, and boy, they have a warrant out for their arrest for carjacking, and you find all of these other things, you just took that criminal off the street. You completely took them out of the equation. Not only that, 5 other criminals drove by your location and saw those red and blue lights on, and they're like, ooh, we better not go to Walnut Creek. They're making stops again. So I think if you look at crime overall in the region, you are going to see an increase, not only just by national trends that occur, but because of the lack of proactive activity in getting these criminals off the street. There are people running around out there with warrants out for their arrest. Who's going to pick them up? It's the boots on the ground. It's the cops in the black and whites that are going to stop these people, check them for warrants, and take them back in. You know, the entities like the U.S. Marshals, they have a very small workforce compared to municipal police in California, where we have thousands and thousands and thousands across the state that are out there, you know, looking for people who are, you know, coming into the communities to do crime.